Hello, everyone. Good morning, evening, or afternoon, depending on when you're watching it. Today, we are going to talk about how we can bring together the power of Visio, Power Automate, and Excel together to help you design and automate your workflows. Before we go into the topic, a brief introduction of the speakers. I am Prateek, and I'm a program manager in the Visio team. Among other things, I'm leading the effort of integrating Visio with different Microsoft 365 products. With me, we have Shilpa and Abhinav, who are going to introduce themselves. Over to you, Shilpa.
Thanks, Prateek. Hello, everyone. I am Shilpa. I am a program manager on Microsoft Visio team. Some of the areas that I am working on are Power Automate and Visio integration, Microsoft Teams and Visio integration, and collaboration features in Visio, etc. Thank you. Over to you, Abhinav.
Thanks, Shilpa. Hi, everyone. I'm Abhinav at Arcadis. I'm a senior management consultant working as the data and process lead on various global programs. I get the opportunity to collaborate with clients and bring their data and processes to life using various tools, especially the ones in the Microsoft suite, including the Power Platform, Visio, and a lot more. Right, I'm really glad to be here with you today.
Processes take time. Whether you're tracking inventory or responding to patient feedback in a personalized way, designing processes quickly and automating workflows help you accelerate. But it's easier said than done. That's where Visio comes in. Visio makes process diagramming, automation, and monitoring fast, accurate, and seamless with its powerful canvas, rich first-party integrations, and suite of collaboration tools. Using the Data Visualizer feature, you can automatically create Visio flowcharts in seconds from process data in Excel. Then, when you make changes to the Visio program or the Excel spreadsheet, those changes are reflected everywhere. Visio also integrates with Microsoft Flow, which means you can quickly create automated workflows across hundreds of popular apps and services. Visio brings the power of visuals to the core of process automation. Assigning connectors is intuitive, making it easy to choose triggers and actions for each process step. Visio lets you go beyond processing design and automation and delve into the world of data-driven insights. You can embed Visio visuals into Power BI dashboards, helping make process monitoring more actionable. Visio diagrams provide a real-world context to Power BI dashboards, empowering process owners to make business decisions quickly and confidently. What would you do with Visio? For more information, visit aka.ms/compare-visio-plans.
Today, we will briefly cover how Visio integrates with different Microsoft 365 products. I will talk about how you can create process diagrams from data. Shilpa will then walk you through how to automate these processes by exporting them to Power Automate. Then Abhinav from Arcadis will talk about how they have used both Visio and Power Automate together to templatize process implementation in his company. Visio allows you to create a lot of diagrams, collaborate on them with your team members, link them to data to see metrics on top of the diagrams that you create. Visio integrates very well with all these different apps within the Microsoft ecosystem. You can create, view, and edit your diagrams within Teams. You can add it as a tab and collaborate with your team members with real-time co-auth. You can embed Visio diagrams in Power BI dashboards and bring them to life. You can export Visio process diagrams to Power Automate to automate them. And that is what we'll be covering in detail in the rest of this session. Data in Excel can be connected with an existing Visio diagram, or a new Visio diagram can be automatically created from data in Excel. Visio diagrams can also be exported to Excel, PowerPoint, and Word for presentation, compliance reports, process manuals, and audit reports. Visio's online plans by default come up with OneDrive storage, where you can store your files to collaborate with your team members. And last but not the least, both Visio Web as well as Visio Desktop allow you to create Azure diagrams using the out-of-the-box Azure stencil and templates. We all understand the need and importance of creating a visual to document and communicate a process that everyone understands. Over the years, while working with many customers, we realized that there are some percentage of people who like to work visually, and they use the canvas to create a diagram. And that is what Visio has been traditionally known for. There are other people whose minds are more in the data. they think how different steps depend on each other as data. They would like to just enter the steps somewhere. And usually we see people using Excel for this. And they would prefer that these diagrams created from that. That's exactly what data visualizer is, that you start with your data and then convert it to diagram or a flowchart. There are some templates that are provided both in Visio as well as in Excel that can help you get started. There are 3 templates in Visio. There's one for creating flowcharts, one for creating cross-functional flowcharts or swimlane diagrams, and one for creating audit diagrams. Each of those have a corresponding Excel template that goes along with them. And that's what is shown here. If you go to Excel and do File New and search for, say, flowchart, you'll find templates for cross-functional flowchart and flowchart. And let's go over to a demo to see how we can use them. To start creating a process diagram from data, go to Excel and click on New. Search for flowchart. Here, you will find 2 very helpful templates. Create a file from it. You will find a few pages in the Excel. The first page gives you an overview of the 3 steps involved in creating the diagram. Either you are exporting it to Visio, or you're going to Visio and importing your Excel file. The second page explains how to fill in the data in the template and has a description for each of the fields. It is very helpful the first times you are using it. And the third page has a starter table. This one has a couple of placeholder rows. Let me show you another one that has data from a real process. The first column is process step ID that uniquely defines every step in the process. Every row in the table corresponds to a shape in Visio. The second column is process step description. This is the text that will finally appear on each shape in the Visio diagram. Let me now talk about the shape type field. This describes which shapes a Visio diagram will use for each of the steps. Now let me go to the next step ID column. This defines how the shapes connect to each other in the diagram. Here it shows P100 is connected to P200 and P400 is connected to both P600 as well as P500. Connector label column shows the text that will appear on the arrow. Similar to the next step ID, these are comma separated values when a shape is connected to more than one shape. In case of a swimlane diagram, you also need to define a function or a swimlane and a phase for each of the shapes. In this case, this is a process for analyzing customer responses, and swimlane describes the team that is responsible for each of the steps. And the phase column describes when this step will actually happen. Let us now take this data to Visio. For that, I will click on Table Design, and under Export, I will find an option to export this table as a Visio diagram. Now this will take you to Visio. Here in this wizard, since we want to create a cross-functional flowchart, I will select that. The file is automatically selected based on where I exported it from. Now, as this is a cross-functional flowchart, we need to select the function as well as the phase. All of these columns are coming from the Excel table that we exported from. Process step ID is already selected based on the uniqueness of the values that were there. Process's description is also selected, and the shape type column is also already selected. To improve the accessibility of the diagram, you can also choose a column that will have the alt description. Now here we need to define which shapes that will be used to create the diagram. By default, it uses the basic flowchart shapes, but we can also choose from a wide library of shapes that Visio provides. In this case, I want to create this diagram using BPMN shapes. Now, wherever the word start is used, I want to use the start event shape. And similarly, For end, I want to use end event shape. And here for process, I want to use task shape. And for decision, I want to use gateway shape. Moving next, this step asks you to define how the connectivity of the shapes is defined. And here we are using next step ID column in which it has automatically detected. And they are comma separated. So we will go by default and click on finish. And with these few simple steps, the diagram is created. To improve the visibility of the diagram, I might want to change the theme. It will improve the readability as well. And once these customizations are done, you can go to design and even export this as a template. So you don't have to make these changes every time you create the diagram. If you make further changes in Excel, you can click on refresh diagram, and this option will keep the diagram up to date. And in case you want to make changes in the Visio diagram, you can also use the option of update source data to write the changes back to Excel.
Thanks, Prateek. Let's talk about automation of these processes. So creating and automating a workflow process is a long drawn process with various stakeholders involved. You need to ensure that everyone is on the same page and signs off on the process. Different people who are involved have different levels of expertise. For example, many a times the SME or a BA who are involved have the most knowledge of the process, but they are not technically adept to actually automate it. They must depend on the IT engineers to do the automation process. With this capability of export to PowerPoint from Visio, you can easily complete the process of automating process very easily and seamlessly. Visio is a first-class tool to capture business process. It gives you the tools to organize your most complex processes into highly visual, easily digestible workflows that optimize the way people work. Out-of-box shapes, templates, and easy drag and drop help save a lot of time. Plus, Visio's built-in collaboration capabilities allow you to review your flows with colleagues and stakeholders to ensure that everyone's feedback is properly captured before the process is actually automated. Microsoft Power Automate, as you know, is a part of Power Platform family and enables you to automate secure workflows and with a no-code guided experience. So these two apps together helps you to design and automate business processes in no time so that you can just focus on your attention where it's needed more. So there are many ways to capture a business process in Visio. First one is converting data in Excel into a business process, as Prateek just explained. You can create a business process directly in Visio using different shapes and different templates that are available out of the box. For example, flowcharts, cross-functional flowcharts, BPM and diagrams, etc. Export to Power Automate is directly available today with the BPMN diagrams, but each and every other kind of flowcharts can be converted to a BPMN diagram and exported to Power Automate. Similarly, SharePoint designer diagrams can also be converted to BPMN diagrams and exported to Power Automate in few simple steps. Now, the whole process of automation can be completed in 3 steps. First is to design the business process. We just spoke about different ways to get a business process. The next one is to map or connect each and every shape with a Power Automate connector in Visio itself. And now the final step is basically export and take this particular skeleton of the business process to Power Automate. And once you export this, the skeleton of the process is ready in the Power Automate for you to consume. Let's see through a demo how it all actually works.
So this is the process that Prateek created from data in Excel. Let's see what actually is happening in this particular process. This is a customer feedback process wherein if we are getting a new response, we are trying to get the details from the response, adding it to the SharePoint list. And after adding, we are trying to analyze the product satisfaction rating. Depending on what kind of rating we are getting, we are taking different steps So for example, if the rating is greater than 2, then send an email to the customer, add the suggestion if the customer has suggested anything to the customer ask list, and furthermore. If the product satisfaction rating is less than or equal to 2, then analyze some other field. Here we are analyzing money value rating, and then do certain steps after these. So you can have multiple different kinds of customer feedback process. This is a typical example of it. Now let's see how we can make this diagram ready to export it to Power Automate. If you go to Process tab, you will find Microsoft Power Automate section over here. There are two buttons. One is Export and another one is Show Flow Markup. Selecting this Export button basically opens this pane. This pane will help us to export this diagram to Power Automate. Now you can see these are some placeholders that have come up on each and every shape. So what we need to do is basically we need to connect each and every shape with a Power Automate connector. So let's understand what all things are there in this export pane. This is a selected trigger. If you have multiple triggers in the page, you need to select that. It is by default selected because there is just one trigger in our diagram. Now this is map conditions. So as soon as you select one gateway, which tells us that there are two ways if we go out of that gateway. So you can select that whichever gateway is saying yes and whichever gateway is saying no. Similarly, you need to select for the other ones too. Once you map the conditions, you will see there are some resolve issues. If there are any conflicting changes, if there are any issues, then you will get to see all these issues in the resolve issues section. So here it is right now showing that one or more shapes don't have triggers or actions. Apply the appropriate trigger or actions. So that means we need to connect each and every shape with some trigger or action. So now you will see as soon as I select this shape, it goes to triggers and sections section of the export pane. Here, let's suppose what is the first shape. This is new response received. So I can just go to the connectors and I select Microsoft Forms. It will show me all the triggers and actions which are available. So here it is when a new response is submitted. So when I selected this one, the icon appears over here. That means my shape has been connected to this particular trigger. So let's go to the next shape. This is get response details. Again, form. Let's pass a connector to some other shape now. Send a thank you email to the customer. So here probably I want to use Outlook email. So I can just go, I can say Office 365 Outlook, and I want to send an email. So similarly, you can supply action or triggers to different shapes in the diagram. So in the interest of the time, I have kept one diagram ready, filled with all my actions and triggers. So here you will see that each and every shape has been connected with some action or trigger. Let's go to the flow pane and see if I have anything over here. You will see that there are no issues to resolve now because I have my diagram is correct. I have supplied connectors, actions and triggers to all my shapes. So this diagram is now ready to take it to flow. So when I say export, this dialog appears and I can just provide any name to my diagram. You can see the details over here that, okay, these are some of the services that you need to get connected to. And if you have permissions or not, that will appear over here. If you don't have any, or if there is any issue with any service, or if you don't have permissions, and you can fix it, fix those right here. So when I say create flow, now what it is doing is basically it is translating all my BPMN shapes to Power Automate shapes with that particular connector, with that particular trigger or action. So I am done over here. By clicking on this link, I can directly go to Power Automate site. So here it is. I can go to edit and I can see the diagram. So my skeleton of the diagram is now ready for us to pass on the parameters. Now, as you can see, this diagram is a little complex in the sense, if I want to make out sense of this diagram right over here, it might be a little difficult. Especially with management folks, especially with the business people who actually wants to just find out that, okay, what is actually happening in this particular process. Now, this process, you need to connect it to specific parameters. For example, here you need to supply it with the farm ID. You need to get into the details, what farm ID and what response ID and all those details. And it will be basically ready for you. So, in organizations, what we see is that there are so many people who wants to automate the processes, but they have to depend on the engineering team to get it, ready and basically automate that particular process. But now, as you see here, there is no code actually required to automate this particular process. Anybody can just design that process in Visio and can just pass on the parameters over here. So that is really easy and automated. You can, in fact, also templatize it. You can just create the diagram in Visio and you can create many instances of these flows in Power Automate.
We have with us Abhinav from Archidus today. Let us now see how Visio and Power Automate are helping Archidus templatizing the automation process and saving them a lot of time. Over to you, Abhinav.
Just as the team was explaining, right, so we have all these different solutions and we wanted to show you on how we can implement it in some of the ways that Archidus has been doing it through and through in our global organization. So Archidus is the leading global design and consultancy firm for natural and built assets. We work in partnership with our clients to deliver exceptional and sustainable outcomes throughout the lifecycle of their project from end to end. So in our example today, we wanted to share with you one of the ways where we are able to use Visio to make our processes more standardized and automate them too, right? So at Archidus, we conduct audits, assessments across a global portfolio for multiple programs, for multiple sites. It has historical audit result trending. And in the end, we do portfolio risk profile mapping too. These are one of the solutions that we provide our clients. So for each of these processes, we can bring to life the automation elements after we templatize them too, using the Power Platform and Visio. Let's go over the process itself for a quick bit. So when we look at the different process stages, you can see on the top the workflow process steps laid out. So it starts from overall task management, right? So whenever you do have an audit, you need to first list out the tasks as to who all are involved in the audit itself and which step comes after which. Then we have the pre-assessment questionnaire step, which is basically something that we need to gather all the information from different stakeholders who are responsible for the audit so that when we do go for the assessment at the particular site, we have the information so that the audit itself can be successful. Scheduling plays a big role so that the things that are required to be done during the course of the audit is available. The required folks at site are available so that the downtime of the sites is also considered and a successful audit is conducted overall, right? The auditor training is something that we need to ensure that the auditors are in line with what the client needs to, and the client also has a total buy-in of the auditors that are going to be at site and conducting the assessment. The assessment itself then takes place at the site, right? And there are various ways to capture the results. Either we can use some of the Power Platform tools to capture that information, or it can be something as simple as an Excel template. We take that information and then consolidate it finally within Power BI, which is usually our tool of choice when we showcase the results consolidated in a one single point of source of truth format. So let's kind of go into one of these processes to look into what the process itself would look like when we segment it step by step. So over here, we're looking at the pre-assessment questionnaire, right? So as I was explaining before, this is one of the critical steps that leads into the assessment itself. So For a pre-assessment questionnaire, the first part is the survey, where various stakeholders answer a list of questions, provide documents, so that that information can be then sent back to the program manager. When we capture this information through the survey, it does take into consideration the global portfolio too, right? So for example, think of someone who's submitting a survey in APAC and your program manager is located in the US. He would need to be notified immediately so that that is one of the things that they can take over to the next stage. Now, if we had not automated this process, there would have been a lot of back and forth emails that would have need to be tracked, especially when you're talking about many sites across the globe. So to make it in a stepwise format, the first step we always do is to process it, right? Which step comes after which part. So for example, over here, the survey is taken, there are notifications that are already predefined using Power Automate, and then the information that is filled in from the survey is then pushed into a data storage, right? You can use various applications to store your data itself within the Microsoft Suite, right? But for a template version, we go with SharePoint as the default solution that we provide. Let's look at another example too. So the other part was the assessment itself, right? So what happens when the assessment is completed and then submitted? Once the template or the information is submitted, one of the ways to store it is in a SharePoint. So when it does go into a SharePoint, what happens next? We use Visio quite a bit over here so that we can identify which step goes over, so that we can identify each step that comes after the process and ensure that the document storage and the pre-assessment part of it is completely done. What this enables is if you have different reviews that are in place, for example, you have the legal review, you have the initial review that needs to be done by the client, then you have additional reviews from the program manager and the site so that the corrective actions can be tracked. All of this can be stepwise placed and then automated in a fashion using the Microsoft Suite tool. Finally, obviously, all this information is then pushed into a Power BI dashboard, or it could be any other dashboard too, right? Where we consolidate all this information and then make it available for different folks, different stakeholders, and different views across the different client portfolio. So once we got really good at doing this, and once we started implementing this in various programs, one of the key questions that came into being was, why do we templatize this, right? And the other question that came from different programs was, how do we implement this across the organization, and how can we do it a lot more effectively so that it is easily implementable across various projects? So the kind of questions that we got, where can I use it in my project, right? What expertise would my team need? How can I make this replicable? Do I need to start from scratch? So for all these questions, we turn to Visio, where we are now able to, like Shilpa was just showing a little while back, integrate the Visio part of the process part of it with the Power Automate side of the house too. This leads to quite a few benefits, right? Because not only are you able to have repeatable implementation, you can scale this process across your organization. There are reduced expertise requirement to set it up itself. Not everyone needs to know what the coding has to happen, or not everyone needs to know Power Automate in its complete steps, right? And there is definitely a lot of effectiveness in cost and even in time that you can gain, because you've templatized the base process from where you're starting from, so that you're not starting from scratch at each time. There is a feature of having this centralized and having a standard implementation through and through your organization that certain organizations benefit from too, giving them the flexibility to change it to the requirement of the site as and when required. We realize that each program is different, so we do let them choose how they want to change and customize the template to their specific program, but we give them somewhere to start from.
Abhinav, this is great and actually very satisfying when we see our customer using the technology that we create. They use it for business critical things in their company. So how do your teams use the templates that you've created? What are the outputs that you provide them?
Really great question, Prateek, right? And so let's kind of look at the Visio templates that we provide to our customers itself, right? We provide it in a central repository so that different folks can access it through and through in the organization, but you can see in the template where they start from and how they can then bring it to life, right? So let's go over to the Visio diagram. So like we were looking at a few minutes back, we have templatized the process for some parts of the audit, like we were just showcasing in the PowerPoint, right? So over here, you can see the pre-assessment questionnaire part has been laid out as to what each step of the process will be. So to quickly walk through it, right? So when a new response is received, we get the response details, we identify which program it would be. It could be for program 1, program 2, or you could have many additional programs too, right? But in this case, we just wanted to have it for 2 programs since it is a template. Now, once we do know which program it is for, we then can push the information into a database. In this case, as part of the template, we take the new database just to be as SharePoint. However, you can define this to be Azure or any other connections that you can have directly from the Power Automate solution. And once that is done, you can also send notifications to different stakeholders so that they know that there have been responses that have been identified and put together. Now, since we have put this together in a templatized format, we can also see that how is it that we can trigger each of these to be automated, right? So in Visio, the way that we did templatize it is by using the BPM and basic shapes. And the reason for using the BPM basic shapes is so that we can associate each of these steps to different parts of the Power Automate solution itself. So you can see that in the process in the show markup, when you click on that, you will see what is it that we have predefined as part of the solution, right? So for example, over here, you'll see that the new response received is through a Microsoft form that we've defined as, right? The database that we are using is SharePoint, right? And the email notifications is to Outlook. But how did all of these come to be in the first place, right? So when you click on one of these and when you hit the export button, you will see the export pane, but also see the triggers, actions, and flow mapping that is available over there. At this location, when you look at the triggers and actions, you will see the complete list of triggers and actions that is available online on Power Automate. And you can search for the trigger and action that you want to associate your starting point from. So as part of the template, we wanted this to be when a new form is received, right? So you can select form, for example, it delists to those icons, and then you can select when a new response is submitted. Similarly, you can go through each of these steps and select the trigger action that you need. And based on whether it's a trigger or an action, you can choose and set it so that the template can be automated that way. Now that we've seen how the pre-assessment questionnaire works, let's have a quick look at the other example that we were showing in the presentation. So for example, in the assessment like we were talking about, right? What happens when a new assessment is completed? We want this to go through a few certain steps, right? And since these are global programs, we want to reduce the number of back and forth emails and transitions that happen so that details are not lost. And the way that we've defined it is when a new assessment is uploaded, right? The assessment details are taken, the approval process starts, and then we identify whether the assessment has been approved or not based on the email stakeholder gets, and he is able to choose whether the information from the assessment is all okay and whether it should be approved or not, right? So once the email is approved and the details are received and they do approve the assessment, you can then send additional email approval notifications already automated to the person who has uploaded the information, or maybe a few other stakeholders too, right? So maybe the site wants to know it, maybe the program manager who is at the client side would not want to know it, so that you can just do those additional automations as part of the template too. And then you can also move the file from the first stage to the second stage. This becomes really helpful when you have those different steps from legal review to initial review to the final review at site, and then uploading the file to the final place so that we can automate it and dashboard it for results consolidation, right? Over here, like you say, this is the template, and obviously additional approvals can be added based on the program that you're working for. Similarly, with the show flow markup, you can see that over here, it was SharePoint, right? Over here, we use Microsoft approvals and then Outlook and SharePoint and so on. And similarly, when you hit the export button, you can see the triggers and actions and so on. Now, just to show you or give you a feel of what this template looks like, when we hit the export button, right, you can see over here, this can be exported directly. When you export it from the Visio template, this is automatically triggering and connecting the sign-in to your Power Automate, and it can create a flow, right? So for example, this is bringing audits to life P5, just because I have a few bringing audits to life already available. But when we do that, you can create the flow, and this flow is automatically created on your Power Automate, right? Now it says that it's already created, and now you can go to Power Automate. So let's hit done over here and then move up onto my Power Automate section. I'll quickly hit refresh since we just uploaded it. And when we go to My Flows, you will be able to see the thing that we just uploaded a few seconds back, right? And when you open the bringing audits to life, you can see over here that the template that we just uploaded step by step is completely available over here. Now, just taking a step back, thinking about what those steps were, right? When a new response is received through a Microsoft form, we had a loop to go and look at what the response details are, identify the program, look at if we identify a particular program to one, then move the information to the SharePoint. In this case, it's just a SharePoint list, right? It could have been Azure or any other database like we were discussing earlier, and then send notifications to the people who are associated with those programs. Similarly, if it was the other program, you can then go to program 2 and then send the notifications to program 2 too. Now, this template gives you the flexibility to start from this location instead of you having to do this entire process from the scratch for every project that you bring up, right? And this becomes really helpful across through and through the organization when we provide them the capability to hit export button and start from here, and giving them the capability to think through what else can they do to automate their solution and product. Right? The variety of templates not only sparks efficiency, but also gives ideas and generates the what can we do better for our clients through and through our organization.
Thank you, Abhinav. So it seems like that you have made the complete process really easy and simple. I would definitely like to understand that how much coding expertise is needed and at which parts of the complete process of automation.
So thanks, Shilpa. As part of the product team, you guys have solidified the process in such an easy format that we are able to give different folks an easy export feature that it doesn't require people with coding background to set this up, right? And once they have this template, they can export that pre-information, and even to set it up post the pre-setup that we give them, all they need to know is know which SharePoint they're using, know which repository the information is going to, right? So it's extremely easy for folks to be able to just link to the information. So they need to know basic fundamentals of how Visio and maybe Power Automate work, but no coding experience in general at all. And obviously, the more complex your program is, the more developed you want to create your processes. I guess some coding may be required at that point, but true and true for our implementations, we've seen real good success not having a lot of coding expertise required in different programs.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you for sharing this complete experience with us. Um, Thank you guys for watching this session. If you want to learn more about Visio, I encourage you to check out the other Visio sessions. I hope you are as excited as I am. Thank you.